What's up, folks? Casual Dad here with another Warhammer Combat Cards video, and since we have a couple more hours left of this current Necron campaign, it's a great time to keep knocking out the Necron Warlords, so we're going to jump to one of the ones I have missed so far. We're going to go ahead and go with one who is... interesting. Nemesor Zahndrekh. Now, he's got two abilities that I really want to focus on right now. His first is a passive mod. So at the start of each player's turn, so it could be yours or your opponent's, all of your Necron cards receive a plus 15% bonus to either their melee or range stats for the duration of that turn. And then the first time the Nemesor is targeted for damage or takes damage from like barrage or a death blow or anything, his card is removed from play and replaced with a taunt bodyguard, the Varguard Oberon. And so you're going to see him in play. A couple quick things I want to highlight too is he is epic, so he is a little bit slow to level, but he's also been around for a long time, so any older players probably have a relatively high level of him. And he does have a secondary trait of Inspire, which stacks with his ability, which is great. Assuming you have any other bodyguards on the table, because he himself, his stats are fine. It's a little bit low for his price point, but not awful, especially with Outflank and the fact that you get to play him twice, because after that Varguard thing happens, he does come back. And then the Varguard has Taunt as his base ability, and then the second ability that sucker has is Shields, which cracks me up every time I see it. If you get a max level Varguard, he's sitting on the table with Taunt and 2 Shields, which is just incredibly obnoxious to remove, and just straight unreasonable, so you won't really be able to get at the Warlord for another couple turns. So that's pretty spectacular. A couple things about that. Because the buff can be either to ranged or melee, you do kind of want your deck to be flexible and have at least some option to use melee and or ranged attacks with every character. You can see I've got a couple exceptions in here. This guy only does melee, and this guy kind of does melee. So those two sort of flip each other. But in general, it's a pretty balanced deck. I'm trying to get the biggest advantage out of the Nemesor's ability to just kind of try it. And this is pretty balanced price-wise. I don't have anything crazy high. I have the one card with Shields. It's also the only one that'll trigger Big Game Hunter, which should help in this campaign. I'm going to go ahead and jump in and play a game here real quick. And one of the things that was funny about the Nemesor is I always feel just a little bit let down because I'm watching for the wrong things. The big thing is when that buff flips from melee to ranged or vice versa, you can feel kind of robbed. It's going to be like, oh, I was saving up my readies, I was ready for this blow, and then it flips to the attack type you didn't want. Which is totally fine. And it's just one of those things that it's bonus damage, you're not guaranteed it, you want to be aware of that whenever you are playing the game and not feel like too upset when it goes away, when you don't want it to. But that's the thing about it, it's so random it always drives me a little bit nuts. It's also an older ability, so it doesn't have the visual cue, so I just saw it flash very briefly. I've got the ranged buff, but you have to click on a card to see it if you miss that prompt. And they'll say 15% buff to range. Now that works out, because a ranged attack would be kind of appropriate here. I'm going to not take it, though. I'm going to go ahead and ready. I can ready as much as I want with Necrons, because they have no Psychers, so you're never wasting a buff if you use your Psychic ready. And it is random, so it can flip every turn, but it doesn't flip every turn. And sometimes it just turns off. So you can see, yeah, and we'll get the reconnect. You can see every single turn, their turn, my turn, their turn, my turn. You see the Nemesor's logo flip a little bit where it could randomly select a buff to either melee or psychic, or melee or ranged. Could pop up anytime. So it's just something you want to watch out for and keep an eye on, so he can be kind of a challenging Warlord to play just because you can easily miss which buff is active right now, or if a buff is active, when you're doing the math on what attack to do on the following turn, you may be betting on, okay, so there we got the buff to melee. So it's so fast. I do wish there was another visual cue that would tell you a little bit more often what exactly was active when. Because if you're clicking on a card, you can just not see it, which I think I did just miss it there. All right, cool. Another thing I've got here is I've got a lot of cards that have a lot of hit points and decent stats in both stacks. And then, like I said, I balance the cost throughout the deck. So they're all kind of in the mid-20s, low 30s. And this guy is a perfect example of a great Nemesor card. Reasonable price point. Usually, I mean, when he's not damaged, he has pretty high hit points and just decent stats on both, and then outflank to just kind of balance that ability across the board for both offense and defense. I'm going to go ahead and kind of top these off a bit. Yeah. He's a really, really powerful Warlord, and one of the Necron Warlords you'll probably see perform the best, just because the flat buff is always there. Like, there's no trigger for it. You don't have to do damage like Ulthakar. You don't have to do anything special for it. You just have it. The randomness hurts, but it's still there, and it's there for offense and defense. So it's good, and good enough to make him just a good warlord. But then also there's the silly trickery play you can do with the Varguard deployment that makes it just a little bit over the top, to the point where it's a very powerful warlord. But it is the most challenging warlord to play of the Necron faction, in my opinion. Kind of. The thing is, it's a passive mod, and then you can't really... There's a low floor, or a high floor, excuse me, to when you can play Nemesor himself, because he doesn't have to be the last card you play. That's an important thing to note. You can play him early, and then have him actually, the Varguard, actually screen your surviving bodyguards for a bit before you actually do... Let's see, what are we going to do? Like, give me the range bonus, buddy. Nah, hey, sweet. Okay, we get the range bonus. Not that I necessarily want to shoot that, but, you know, we'll go ahead and do it. Probably going to regret that play. I was talking too much, but anyway. So it's one of those things where you can... I was going to say you can't play it wrong. You absolutely can play it wrong. But so I played him before he's my final card, so I still have something else in the deck, and that was very intentional, because I want that taunt to protect my bodyguards, which I don't necessarily need. So there we go. So he did Psychic, which is the safe call. Varguard pops out, has that melee debuff ready, a decent melee attack, decent hit points. Only costs 12, but he's free, so who cares? That's one of the funny things about the Nemesors. For his stats, his price seems a little bit high until you factor in the passive mods all game, and then also the fact that he comes with a free taunt card and essentially a second life where he himself won't die because you have an extra card to tank the hits for him. So there we've got the range bonus. He's going to Psychic me again, which gives me a perfect opportunity to just wreck his day. That was a bit of a weird situation where I wanted to keep this guy alive more than I wanted to actually do damage to him because I couldn't kill him anyway. I'm not in any danger of dying, but see here I've got the Warlord himself in the deck, and I don't have to play him. I can pop that guy down and really absolutely hammer in that I'm going to win this. I'm at rank 21 in the campaign right now. I've gotten to rank 23 twice and promptly gotten my butt smacked right back down to 21. So that's here we are. This may be the ceiling of my Necron play and or my Necron cards. That could be either way. So, but this was a fairly easy win. You saw that buff factor in all game. You saw just kind of the... Necron's biggest strength is just they have generally good stats. They're just good. They've got a lot of Medicae. They have melee and ranged in buckets, and they just are a very, very sturdy deck, or a very sturdy faction that also benefits from attack buffs. So, and then also Nemesor himself is just a very defensible warlord and the most dynamic because you can play him multiple times and have that taunt play in there. So you've got a lot of weird, tricky options in endgames to really eke out wins in close games that most other warlords in any faction don't have. He's almost on par with Lilith, Hesperax, and Eldar, and then also Creed in Servants of the Emperor, except that he himself has better stats and more flexibility than either. So, yeah, there we go. That was Nemesor Zahndrekh. Just to talk a little bit more about the deck, because I didn't focus on it too much. This is what I built this time. A lot of the time you'll see thinner decks that have more of the Satan shards. Like the Satan shards are very common inclusions with him, particularly the Deceiver, because it's one of the more flexible and one of the cheaper ones. He does do well with Fear. I mean, anything. Sort of the funny things about Necrons is their deck builds are generally very flexible because they have so many different combinations of just good stats. That's the advantage of only having the 2 attack stats, is there's only so many combinations of numbers you can hit. And since they have limited trait pool and a limited card, and they have limited trait pool and just generally good stats, it's just a really interesting faction to build in because they just do those 2 stats very, very well on top of pretty stellar hit points. So yeah. And the Nemesor is probably the most Necron-y of all the Necron warlords. He's one that works in pretty much any build with pretty much any combination of cards you could think of. Just a great piece and fun to build with. But the randomness always throws me off a little bit, and I just don't play Necrons that much anyway. So he's one that I didn't talk about first, but one to definitely keep on your radar as one to play if you are playing Necrons. That's it. So far we've done all but one, which will be my very next video. Guess who that is?